Welcome to the ZAGTalk podcast live. My name is Dr. Guy Danoff, and tonight we're going to be talking with Dr. Josh Wideman. He's going to be talking about cracking the chiropractic philosophy. And I got to tell you, this is going to be pretty exciting as I'm going to bring him in right now. Without further ado, let's bring in Dr. Wideman. And Dr. Wideman, first of all, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, you excited about tonight?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good conversation.
It's going to be a great conversation. I'll just put this on the screen for everyone. So basically, you're going to be talking about cracking the chiropractic philosophy, and you're going to be on the adjustment. And we'll get into that in just a second. And obviously, you have your own business, your own chiropractic business. Actually, it's actually rehab and performance that you have for in Brentwood, Missouri. And I'm really excited because you're going to be talking about kind of a different way of looking at how you treat patients. And I know you've kind of got, 3 big points. And I want to start with the first one. And I absolutely love your graphic here. And talk about the chiropractor's role as the musculoskeletal quarterback. What does that mean? I mean, we're all looking at that image. I don't know about you, but when I see Peyton Manning, what's going through my mind is what? Omaha, Omaha, Omaha. So
Exactly.
What is that Omaha in your world, certainly as a chiropractor?
Well, if you think of, there's no doctor of health. Like there's a medical doctor, there's doctors of chiropractic, there's PTs who are doctor, so there's no real doctor of health. So I think what I was getting at with this was we need someone that is kind of overseeing the healthcare of a patient. And in this case, we're talking more musculoskeletal health, not just there's other aspects, obviously, but musculoskeletal would be kind of the main thing. And so, whenever we think of a traditional chiropractor, we think of the adjustment, and we think of it winds up being more of a technician's role. So I think that the way I wanted to kind of define it was more the difference between taking someone and like looking at everything and then figuring out where they need to go, rather than, if a patient comes to me and if the only thing that I have is the adjustment, then I feel like we're selling ourselves short. So I think that there's a lot more that we can unpack there. But I think the biggest thing is the fact that, whenever someone comes in with a knee injury, they need a game plan. And they need someone that's confident to kind of run the game plan. And I think, from a traditional lens, chiropractors are more technicians, and they're not really, but I think we could be more. I guess that's really what I'm saying is we have the training, but we just kind of put ourselves in a box where we end up just doing that one thing.
Absolutely. And so with that, I know you got a few points here, and let's bring those out because I think they're pretty good ones. But talk to us about now how you think chiropractors should be seen.
Yeah, I think that there's a, I don't know if you want to call it an identity crisis. Back in 1910, there was this whole deal where chiropractors were part of alternative medicine. So all of alternative medicine is kind of pushed aside, and drugs and surgery became kind of the main thing. And I think that really has kind of put us in this box where all we do is the adjustment. And I think that there's just more to it than that. And I think that if we really go back to the root of doctor means to teach. And I think that having, that patient education as a key component is huge. But if all we're doing is that technician's role, we're not really educating the patients on, why they might have their particular ailment, or they might not, have full awareness of what's going on with the situation. I think that there's more that can be done than just the traditional kind of adjustment, if you will.
Absolutely. So with that being said, talk about your third point. I think it's really interesting when you talk about health is a proactive investment. Talk to us a bit about that more, because I think, again, the way we view maybe chiropractic, this might be a way to help unpacking more of kind of what you mean by it, and certainly the way that you certainly work with your clients.
Yeah. So my view, and it can be challenged if you want, but I think my view is like you need to be the CEO of your own health.
Okay.
And I think that we need to take a proactive approach, and you know we need to be kind of looking at all these different aspects. And I think that the people who are the healthiest, they're not healthy by accident.
Right.
They have a consistency, they have a game plan that they stick to. um, and I've got an interesting little anecdote here. So Tiger Woods, potentially one of the greatest golfers of all time,
Mhm.
he doesn't really use training aids. So if you ever seen him on the range, he never uses a training aid. So he has done the same putting routine all his entire career. So he uses two tees and he does a one-handed drill. Those are the only two things that he does, and he just tries to swing the putter head kind of between the two tees. And so the point here is he has found what works for him. And I think everyone needs, like, it's all individual. Like what I do might not be what you need. And I think that you got to kind of figure out what works best for your biology. Now, there are first principles that we can kind of distill down to and kind of find the bedrock. But I feel like the biggest thing is, our health is our own personal responsibility. I think a lot of times we try to farm it out to the medical profession. And I feel like, we go to the doctor and we're looking for an answer. Well, they don't have the answer. Like, you have your own answer. If the doctor is listening, you're going to tell your story and we're going to be able to kind of uncover it. But I feel like um, instead of trying to find the solution, like, you really know what you need to do. If you ask someone, hey, how's your diet? It's maybe not as good as I need. How's your exercise? Well, I've been slacking off. Like, what you need to do.
Right.
For whatever reason, you just don't. And so I think figuring out how to sift through, your own BS, I think is the way to kind of, figure out what you need and how best to kind of get there. And then that's where the healthcare provider really comes into play, is like, we help guide the process. So,
Right.
we'll give you a nudge in the right direction, but ultimately it's up to you to do it. I can't do the sit-ups for you, or I can't walk the 5 miles. Like, you've
Right.
got to go out and do it. So I think that's really what it comes down to.
No, but I will say this from working with you over the past few years, that when something does happen, like in my situation, what happened when I had you discovered, right, in my walking gait, when I started
Yeah.
walking, and I've recently, as you know, over the past year, I've lost over 91 pounds now.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, you knew that roughly around 25 to 30 minutes of walking, I would get some discomfort in my foot. And
Mm-hmm.
then you realized, he's asked me a question like, hey, did you ever break your foot? And I said, it's ironic. I've only broken one bone in my body.
Yeah.
And it was in my senior year of football at West Illinois when I broke my navicular bone. And then you looked at the wear pattern of my shoe. And then you realize, okay, we think it's an ankle problem, but really it's a hip problem. And then the next thing you know, we're going to show some video of that in just a second about your video analysis. But I just want to say this, though, that it's really important that when we do go to the doctor, like in my case, I was really scared because I never saw so much wear on the right side of my
Mm-hmm.
shoe that looked like someone literally took my shoe and just, cut off like at a 45-degree angle
Right.
that bottom part. And I'm calling you. I sent you the photos like, hey, doc, can you help me? And
Yeah.
in that case, and I'm just saying, as a patient, we have no idea. I mean, okay, yeah, I'm logical enough to figure out, okay, it's based on when I'm walking, but what's causing it? I have no idea. Because why? I wasn't necessarily in that much pain or discomfort because at that time I wasn't walking that much. But once I got, working on the walking program, that's when you had to intervene.
Well, and that's the thing. So the and I don't mean this in any negative, but it's like the average sedentary person, they do not put enough load or speed or force into their system. So
Right.
they can get away. I was actually at the park earlier today, and I was watching a couple people run. And so whenever this one lady, she was doing like an interval where she was like running for 15 seconds, and then she was walking. Whenever she was walking, her gait was almost normal,
Yeah.
what you would consider ideal. But as soon as she started to run, you could see the ankle collapse, you could see the knee dive in, you could
Right.
see the pelvis. And so it was like, it doesn't display itself until you add either
Right.
long distance where you start to get fatigue, or you add speed, like you're trying to do sprint repeats. And so
Right.
I think a lot of people, you've got things going on, but you don't even know it's a problem. And I'm not saying it is a problem. I'm just saying it could be a problem. Um,
Right.
but until you start walking, or you start increasing your walking, like, you would never really realize, because what you had with your foot being kind of stuck in that high arch position,
Right.
like, if you're just walking around campus, there's really no problem.
Right.
But
Correct.
now,
Correct.
whenever you say, I need to do this for 45 minutes, or I
Right.
want to get to an hour, it's like,
Right.
okay, well, if your foot is stuck in this position, so we know a high arch,
Right.
that is the stiffest part. Like, whenever you go into a flat foot, that's actually your foot displaying the force. And so
Correct.
if you're in that rigid position, well, now the force has to go up to the knee. Now the force has to go up to the hip. And so we actually saw that the hip was compensating for the foot. And so we were
Correct.
able to kind of unravel that a bit. But it's one of those things that, you know, if you really weren't trying to lose the weight or trying to add in additional activity, you probably wouldn't have even thought about it.
Right. Well, no, you're exactly right. So what I'd like to do is we're still, wrapping up on this segment because we got 3 segments. This is the first segment,
Yeah.
the chiropractor's role as a musculoskeletal quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do right now is that for our live viewers, give them the opportunity. If anyone wants to ask any questions or make any comments, you can easily do that right here on YouTube, and you can just go ahead and type those, right into the comments here. If you have any questions for Doc, and he'll be certainly happy to answer, your questions live. And so as we're maybe waiting for a couple of questions to come in. So Doc, what I want you to talk about now is what I found to be so helpful working with you, where, like you said, I couldn't necessarily feel it, or I couldn't feel the range of motion, or sometimes the treatment you would do, but then you started using video analysis. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the video analysis, because I have a clip, a short clip, when you were giving me feedback on after you did the treatment, you were showing me the range of motion increase that I had, even though I didn't feel it. I was wondering if you could talk about that concept between sometimes when we get a treatment, we don't feel it, but yet if we got video, we can actually see this really good progress that we're making.
Yeah, I think it goes back. We talked about this in our little promo, but
Yeah.
the difference between feel and real. So when you first make a change, it still feels like the old pattern. And so
Right.
part of the exercise, or part of the new movement, is like, you have to now figure out how to use the new range of motion. And so, if I would have asked you, hey, how do you feel? You're going to be like, I feel the same. But
Right.
then whenever I show you, oh, now your legs are moving, like,
Yeah, my hip's moving. You've unlocked my hip because you fixed my ankle. I mean, again,
yeah,
like I wouldn't have believed it until you gave me that video analysis.
right.
And what I really loved is then you were explaining it to me, after what you just did, because I didn't feel it. Now, a few days later, to your point, then it became my new norm. So that I did feel the difference or the change, because my walking gait was so much better. But at the time of the treatment, I didn't feel much different.
Yeah. And, because it's a relatively quick change,
Right.
that's not necessarily going to be a long-term tissue change. And so sometimes we have to make sure that, okay, we got this quick change, which is great,
Right.
but the goal is long-term change. And so, if you would have done nothing and just went on with your normal activities, things might have reverted back to the way they were.
Correct. Correct.
Whereas, with the constant reinforcement of the new pattern, we're able to kind of minimize that older pattern and help to prioritize kind of that newer pattern. And so then you choose the newer, better pattern
Right.
more often, and that's really the goal.
Okay. Well, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna play for everyone a session that we had this summer. and that I ended up recording it with your permission because I wanted to show it, obviously, in your podcast, specifically this podcast.
Right.
And this is basically where you were giving me live feedback. So you just did the treatment. I'm sorry. Well, you start with the assessment, right? The before, and then you did your treatment. And now you're explaining to me the change that I told you I didn't necessarily feel it that much. But when you showed me in the video replay, like that was significant. So let me
Right.
play it, then you can speak to it. All right. So here we go. So this is from a treatment. Again, the issue was I had a wear pattern in my shoe, meaning my walking gait was off. And then Doc was working with me on, first of all, we thought it was an ankle. Then we really figured out what it was is the hip. And I had an issue with the hip. And was him doing some hip treatment on me on that day on the right side. So here's that video.
You'll see as we started, the feet started a little bit closer to where this black box is here. And as we keep going, the barrier keeps, changing as we keep increasing that. And this is a bit temporary in the beginning. So we're always going to see these like big changes in the short term. Now, does this hold? I'm not guaranteeing that this holds this way, but it is a good sign that we can see pretty good changes in the short term, because that means that the joint isn't completely fibrosed and locked.
Yeah, speak to that, because I got to tell you, that was significant when you showed it to me. And I couldn't believe when we started, I was below where that black box was. And then after your treatment, I mean, that range of motion increased by 3 or 4, times better than my,
Right.
My original assessment. So kind of speak to that, and also speak to why the video, what you use with your clients, has been so impactful.
Yeah, so that's a joint pumping technique that we did there. It's not an adjustment, but it kind of is. It's similar, if you will. And so part of joint stiffness or a lack of range of motion could be that the fluid that surrounds the joint can become a bit stagnant. And so by kind of just gently moving the joint back and forth, we can kind of basically make that fluid a little more viscous to where it flows a little easier.
Yeah.
And so whenever we try to put a little, range of motion through that joint, the joint then winds up moving easier. And so we were able to make some pretty quick changes. And so again, when we see quick changes, we know that the nervous system almost had like an emergency brake on that particular area, rather than, because like if you would have said, I've had this for 27 years, and then we did that same technique, what we did wouldn't have got the amount of change, or it wouldn't have been nearly to the same extent. And so it's like, okay, now those tissues have basically been locked in that position for so long that they are now, that is their position. And so you would have to do a completely different technique that would make those tissue changes. And so, I think, again, we talked about this in the promo about the difference between long-term tissue change, which takes consistency over time, rather than those neurological quick changes, which there's research to support. If you get the quick changes in the short term, that allows us to then get those longer term changes. But if we're not able to get those short term changes, the long term changes are much slower and take more effort to create. So I think it's important to say that the adjustment, or all these other things, they have their place. But again, if we're looking at the long term, we've got to be doing something more than just that.
Yeah. So, Josh, we got our first question here. Sam, thanks for obviously making this comment, and I'll address it first, and then I'll let you explain what you did. So the question by Sam is, has there been any problems walking after the hip treatment adjustment? And I'll say it this way, is that, this was a process. I want to say probably this might have taken, 4 to 6 weeks, about, Josh? Does that sound about right?
Easy. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, because every time I'd come in a few times a week, I'd get these adjustments and my range of motion would be getting better. And then over time, I would say over this 2-month period, then I wasn't really experiencing any pain or any changes in my gait, because one of the things that, that Doc did here for me is when I was there, we were doing gait analysis and he was filming my walking gait.
Mhm.
So he would say, hey, I want you to go walk and then come in. And then other times he says, okay, I don't want you to walk first, and then I want you to come in. And so we were looking at that this summer because we could do so based on where he holds his practice, which is really convenient, having this really big facility where we could do this gait analysis. But as far as once I got past that point, what we were doing pretty much at the end of the summer was then it kicked into where I was only meeting him once a week for more of a maintenance or preventative. I'll let him explain that because I think, part of what I think everyone needs to understand, for me at least, I thought one of the greatest values was working with him at the end of the summer, even more so on the preventative side, because if there's any little tweaks that need to be made, he was making it. But I can tell you this, Sam, I've been able to walk up to an hour straight ever since working with Doc. When I first started, I'm telling you, 20 to 25 minutes, I'd be dealing with ankle and issue problems. And so, Doc, take it from your side. But I think Sam asked a really good question because obviously you can kind of talk about what we did over really that 3-month period.
Yeah. So, in the beginning, the goal, everyone wants to feel better, of course.
Right.
But there's a good graph. I could pull it up later, but it's like function has a trajectory, and then
Right.
pain reduction has its own trajectory. But that intersection point is kind of like the sweet spot. And so when that occurs, like, it's not as quick as most people think. And so
Right.
even though we might get a temporary reduction during the visit, you might say, oh man, I went walking on Tuesday and I still had some discomfort. That's normal.
Right.
So the goal is, as we improve function through our exercises and treatment and different things, the goal is that the body is going to self-organize to a certain extent and use that new range of motion, use that new strength that we started to develop. And then it just kind of naturally happens during the gait. So the gait is the end result.
Right.
So I could tell you, oh, I need you to pronate more. I need your big toe to, but it's like, I don't want you to be thinking about every minute piece of the gait cycle. Oh, are you getting hip extension?
Right.
Are your arms swinging? Like, we could micromanage that, but if all we did was micromanage the aspects of gait and we never changed how the joint functions, the joint is going to be like, the way I would describe it is, the shape of the joint dictates how the structure and function are intricately linked. And so if we don't change the shape of the joint,
Right.
you're always going to take that same shape to the quote unquote new pattern. And so the goal will be to change the shape so that the pattern just changes on its own. And most people don't think of it that way. And that's not necessarily something that you're going to maybe hear, quote unquote mainstream, but it's like the way that the body organizes itself is through feedback. And if the joint is consistently giving a very particular set of feedback, then it's always going to fall into the wrong pattern. And so I can tell you, oh, I need you to push off your big toe more. And you can do it whenever you're thinking about it. But as soon as you stop thinking about it, it goes right back.
Right.
And so the only way that changes is if the feedback from the joint changes. And the only way that changes is if we change the shape of the joint. So again, the patient doesn't necessarily need to know all that, but I'm thinking of all this whenever we're doing our stuff. And so it's kind of unsaid, and a little bit comes out here and there, but it's not necessarily something that, oh, we're diving into the nitty gritty per se.
All right. So, Doc, great question. Great follow up, actually. So, I love this. Ashlyn writes, unlike Dr. Danoff, some people experience chronic pain in their day to day life. Why should a patient experiencing this come to you or another chiropractor rather than a pain management doctor? That's a great question.
Well, if you go to a pain management doctor, they're just going to pump you full of medicine. So, and we've been kind of indoctrinated to believe that medicine's the answer, and it has its place. But from a chiropractic standpoint, we're, no drugs, no surgery. Um, and I think that co-management is probably the best, um, the best way. Um,
Okay.
and you may even find that over time you need them less, and you find someone that kind of matches your frequency as far as like how they resonate with the delivery and the messaging and all that. So I think that there's the whole chronic pain thing is definitely that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But why should someone with chronic pain see me? Is
Yeah.
because I am going to look at you and tell you there are so many things that you can do that you've been told not to do. And I'm going to give you your freedom back. And typically, the traditional medical model um, puts you in a smaller and smaller box. And they just say, if it hurts, don't do it. And then it's like, okay, well, if
Yeah.
everything hurts, you wind up doing nothing. And there are so many things that you could still be doing. And in the beginning, the goal isn't necessarily pain reduction per se. It's,
Right.
are you able to do meaningful activities that you enjoy? And if we can get you engaging with a community, engaging with people that you like to be around, you know, it's not that the chronic pain is in your head, but there's so many positive factors that can be at play. It doesn't all come down to proper biomechanics versus improper. Like that's just one piece of the pie. Um, you know, nutrition is a component, sleep is a component. Like there are so
Right.
many things. We're going to get to the sunlight component that no one knows about, and so there are so many things that need to be addressed, and the traditional pain management route isn't going to have the time or have the bandwidth to be able to address all these different lifestyle factors that really need to be incorporated into this holistic
Yeah.
approach.
All right. I just want to let everyone know right now, if you are watching live and you have a question for Doc, please put it in the comments. We are bringing them up live. We've just taken a couple now. And now we have another one. And this one's pretty cool. This is from Skylar. And this was actually directed to me, Doc. And obviously you're going to answer it, but it actually segues perfectly to what we wanted to talk about with point two. And here it is. Skylar says, I have been watching some of your social media content, meaning mine, like mine on my Facebook. When did you realize this harmonious relationship between the human body and nature? And why have I become so passionate about it in terms of sharing it? And Skylar, that is a great question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up right now. And the bottom line is, while I was working with Doc over the summer, there was a really weird thing that happened to me when I was on vacation. And I asked him basically, how did I find the fountain of youth, if you would? Because I felt like I had better energy. I was sleeping better. I was, I just felt overall better. And he asked me, well, where did you vacation? I said, for 8 days, I was near the equator. And then all of a sudden, he tells me all about this. And this is actually point number two, and that is how we can benefit from sun exposure. So, Skylar, thank you for asking that. And Doc, let's tee it up right now, because I'm going to be very honest. I got passionate about it because you've been teaching me about it. You've been educating me about it, but also you've created a program for me that I've been executing on a very consistent basis. And I've been seeing all kinds of great results. I've never felt better in my life. Also, my immune system has never been better, at least as of late, since I started doing this. And my skin, I just can't, people actually make comments about my skin right now that
Yeah.
I've never had before, because I'm not someone wearing all these products. It really has to do with the impact of the sun and the UV rays. And so why don't you go ahead and unpack this for us, as Skylar asks a really good question, that connection between the human body and certainly the nature, in particular, the impact of sunlight.
Yeah, so the sunlight is basically nature's pharmacy. We only see a very small fraction of the visible spectrum. Um, or we see the visible spectrum, but there's so many more octaves, if you will. And so every specific frequency has a role. And so it's one of those things that I've always enjoyed being out in nature. I've always enjoyed, golf and hiking are probably my two, things that I enjoy outside of, healthcare, if you will. And so I've always had this natural kind of inclination towards nature, but it's like I've I've always been curious and I've always felt like there's something missing. And so even within chiropractic, it's like, okay, you learn the adjustment and then it's like, oh, well, there's so much more with exercise and nutrition and all these other things. And it's like, okay, well, after I kind of went down all of those different rabbit holes, it's like, I still feel like there's something missing. Why are people still having so many problems? And I think it really comes down to the fact that we spend way too much time indoors. There was a study done, and this was done by our government of all. And so it was some national toxicity report, and it like the hazards of blue light and the hazards of environmental radiation from different devices and all these different things. And really, the moral of the story is we need to reconnect with nature and kind of disconnect from technology. And nature has really all the answers. There's so much that, again, this could be 14 episodes just on the sun. But the non-negotiable is seeing the sunrise, because the biggest thing with the sun is the circadian mechanism, the circadian timing device. And so all tissues, whether you want to believe it or not, have a clock inside of them. And if your clock is not set to the correct time, the tissue is not going to respond appropriately. So if you think of hormonal problems, so we've got diabetes and we've got, all different kinds, you name it. So if you don't have the correct time in your tissues, the hormones are going to be released at the wrong times. And so if the hormone, say melatonin, is supposed to be released before you actually get tired, preparing you for bed, but if you didn't see the sunrise and now your quote unquote morning started 2 hours late, now you're not going to be tired whenever you're supposed to. And then this now is going to affect your repair programs, your ability to regenerate tissue. Like it's endless on the effects that this has. And so the thing you realize whenever you really start to look into this is nature has all the answers. We just have to start paying attention. And it's sometimes hard to believe how much just getting out in the sun a little bit more is able to change. And you've clearly been a testament to that. But I think the other big thing is, there's a lot of fear around the sun, and there's plenty of research to support the fact that all-cause mortality is actually improved by the longer or the more sun exposure that you get. Right. So it's one of those things that your dermatologist is going to tell you, oh, you need to cover up, you don't wear sunscreen, and there's potential reasons, but really the implications of getting less sun are more damaging than the effects of getting too much sun. And there's maybe room to say that there's really you can't get too much, because 90% of people spend their entire day inside. You only get outside whenever you walk to your car, maybe. And so we're designed to be out in nature. We're designed to be in the sun, and there's so many health benefits. It's hard to even just scratch the surface.
So we pulled up the slide. Why don't you talk a little bit about the solar spectrum? And I think it's kind of important, like you educated me, really was the importance of the, getting out there if you can at sunrise. And if you, if you had sunrise or high noon, right, when it's way high in the sky, and then when the sun sets. This was very helpful for me because there's different things going on at those different times.
Correct. So early morning, first light, if you will, that sun coming up over the horizon, because of the angle of the sun kind of really low on the horizon,
Right.
the way that the atmosphere works, it basically blocks out all of the UV or if you look at the graph, basically the far end of the spectrum, near the purple, green, those colors. And
Yeah.
so the early morning sun is basically the red and infrared. That's the predominant. And so I'm sure,
Yeah.
seen and heard a bunch of, why red light therapy is beneficial. Well, this is nature's red light therapy, if you will. And
Right.
so you can take all, advantages of getting early morning sunlight. One, you're going to set your circadian rhythm because
Yeah.
that's important. But then there are specific reasons due to, like, if we're talking about fat burning, if you don't see the sunrise, beta oxidation or the ability to burn fat through the TCA cycle is basically inefficient. And so if we don't get that signal right from the beginning of the day, it doesn't matter if you're doing a ketogenic diet, it doesn't matter if you're fasting, it doesn't matter if you're doing, like, you're always going to be behind. And so that early morning sunrise really sets the stage for
Mhm.
the rest of the day. It's also protective against the midday sun. So we see that infrared that like preconditions the skin so
Right.
that whenever you go outside at that solar noon,
Right.
that and you can attest to this, that you really don't burn.
Nope.
And
No,
so
no, and I got to tell you, and okay, I'm just gonna be a testimony to this because obviously this is well above beyond my expertise in anything what he's talking about now. But when he told me that, I went out just to try it. Now I stayed within the guidelines that he said as far as exposure. I'm not going to sit out there for 2 hours because I don't need to because I only need X amount of time to get what I need for the body. But I will say this, that I've been fascinated. I put nothing on my skin, nothing. And I'm not afraid of the high noon or between noon and 2 o'clock at all, especially on the mornings that I'm out, watering the plants that I do at my house when the
mhm.
sunrise comes up. And so all I can say is from a testimony standpoint, it's fascinating. I don't understand it myself, but he is actually accurate. I've not burned once this whole time.
Yeah, so just getting back, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. But
Yeah,
the reason why people are so afraid of the sun is burning, right? And then
correct.
there's some evidence that would say if you burn, there's potential for cancer. Okay, well, the reason why those people burn is because they didn't see the morning sun, they didn't get that infrared light, so their skin wasn't preconditioned. So just imagine you go to the beach, you sleep in, you don't go out to the beach until 11:30, basically kind of lunchtime. You go out and then you spend from 11:30 to 3 out at the beach. You come
Right,
home and you're like, man, I look like a lobster. And it's like, because you didn't follow nature's rules. Nature says
right.
you need to, you need to be up with the sun. You need this, the special frequency that nature delivers early in the day so that you can handle late in the day. And it's as really as simple as that. I mean, we could get into the quantum biology and all the nitty gritty, but you don't need to. You just need to see the early morning sunrise. That helps protect you against the noon sun.
Yeah. All right. Here, you got to figure this question was going to come. So here it is. Ashland asked a great question. Dr. Wideman, how do you recommend your clients get the proper amount of sunlight in the winter months when it's cold outside and there's a limited amount of sunlight in the day? That is a great question. That to me is the $1 million question because guess what? We have been blessed, right? We have been blessed. Let's just go there. Even today, it's unbelievable that here we are in mid-October, right? It's October 15th, mid-October, and we're still seeing 83-degree temperatures with a totally sunny sky.
Mhm.
And now in probably less than a St. Louis minute, right? We're going to be dealing with what she just brought up. We'll be hitting, we probably won't even have a fall. We're literally going to go from this crazy summer to the winter. So
Yep.
what do we do?
So the moral of the story is, if you haven't been getting sun, you missed your opportunity. That's what it comes down to. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all bad, but you have to think. So we have circadian rhythm. So we have, a light and we have a dark. So we also have seasonal rhythms. And so we are designed to get as much vitamin D during the summer months as possible.
Right.
But we need darkness, which is kind of like the next point, just as much. And so basically, melatonin actually binds to the vitamin D receptor. So the key in the winter time is to maximize your melatonin production. And how do we get melatonin production? You have to see early morning sunrise, because you've been told that melatonin is made in the pineal gland. That is true, but it's only 5% of your melatonin. 95% is made in the mitochondria, and you need early morning sunrise infrared light to be able for that to take place. So you still have to get out and see the sunrise. You still have to maximize as much time in that early morning as possible. And then you also need to take advantage of sunset and really get as much as that as possible. And don't worry about, like, yes, you still get your noonday sun as well, but just because you're not making vitamin D like you would in the summertime, it doesn't give you excuse to stay inside, because the other side of the coin is you need to embrace cold. No one likes to hear this, but cold is absolutely crucial to surviving the winter. You basically have to be cold. There's a whole deep dive that we could do on that, but basically your body makes light stronger than the sun whenever it's exposed to the cold. So it doesn't have to be a cold plunge, but you need to expose yourself to cold temperatures basically without clothes on or minimal clothes. So you don't need to jackets, minimal amount of clothes, but you do need to embrace being cold during the winter to maximize or to minimize the negative effects, if you will.
All right, Doc, I want to make this easy. Okay. Great question. So now you're just talking to me. You throw out a lot of big words, a lot of big concepts. Okay. I just want you to just right now, this is kind of live. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but now that, let's just say in 2 weeks, we're going to get into the 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would you recommend that I do? Okay. Now I'm not going to be watering plants, right? We're not watering plants when it's in the 30s. Okay, so that's done. So then what would your recommendation be for me in terms of how do I get that sun exposure when it's 30 degrees out? Okay. That, I think that's what really the big question, Ashlyn was asking is, so give it to us practical. I mean, here it is. I'm one of your patients and I've done your summer program and it's worked great. So what would you recommend that I do coming off the summer as we get into the winter months?
So everyone has their phone. Everyone can see when sunrise is.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter if it's cloudy or not. You still have to be outside when it's sunrise. So the infrared light penetrates through the clouds. So the thing about summer is you feel the warmth on your skin, you see it.
Correct.
So you appreciate it. But whenever it's a rainy, cloudy day, you don't appreciate it. You just say, oh, it's dreary, I'm depressed. And so it doesn't matter. Embrace being outside just as much as you were during the summer months. Now, you don't have to stand outside for 20 minutes in the freezing cold, but 3 to 5 minutes would do you a world of good. So shorts and a t-shirt, 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Just and then you can go put some pants and a coat on. But you still should be outside for the remainder of the time. But having that that cold exposure is basically, it primes you in multiple ways. So
Sure.
you're getting it from multiple angles.
All right, so I'm gonna let every viewer know. I want you to check when it gets cold out. I'm gonna be posting on Facebook. I'll be out in t-shirts and shorts for that 5 minutes. Okay.
Yep.
Now I have a little advantage. Only one major advantage is I grew up and lived most of my life in Chicago, and the cold doesn't bother me because here it's nowhere near as windy as in Chicago. It's the wind that can just go through you, like hit your bones, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we don't get that same kind of wind that I got in Chicago. So I can handle cold temperatures not too bad. And I'm willing to try it and see what happens. I want to see if I still get these great effects that I've been experiencing literally over the last, 2 or 2.5 months. So with that, Doc, wrap up on this segment. Then we have a question for you come from the audience.
Yeah. So the other piece of this puzzle is, so we've been talking about sun, but really the dark. So especially now wintertime. So I know it's tough. But basically after sunset, we need to minimize the brightness. And again, this could be a whole other topic, but overhead lights in the wintertime, especially after sunset, are really no good. So you really need to switch to lights being lower on the floor or lamps. And you really need to embrace darkness as well. So does this mean actually going to bed earlier? Yes. So
Okay.
our bodies are designed to get up with the sun and go to bed with sunset, or roughly. So, but the thing that you can do to kind of offset this to a certain extent, it doesn't give you freedom to just stay up to all hours of the night. But fire is, so candles and a fireplace are what you do in the wintertime, or to offset some of this early, where the sun goes down really early. So candles and fireplace are really should be your main sources of light once the sun goes down. If you've got bright overhead lights on after sun, you're basically mismatching the signal, and the timing that you established early morning, you're now completely throwing it off. So darkness is kind of the other side of the coin. We have to make sure that while we're getting all of our sun exposure, we also minimize our light after dark.
Okay. Well, here's your question. This comes from Abraham. Great question. It says, Dr. Wideman, what originally drew you to chiropractic versus other more traditional routes, such as being an MD? Did you know about this holistic style of care when you first got started in the chiropractic? Abraham, those are some great questions. So, Doc, what do you got?
So originally I wanted to be a physiatrist.
Okay.
So a physiatrist is basically, they're like an orthopedic surgeon that doesn't do surgery.
Okay.
And so they do injections. They do they kind of they have like this sports medicine approach. But the more I looked into it, the more like it really wasn't what I expected. And so I will say this whole journey has been like an ongoing process. So, whenever I first started chiropractic, I wanted to be kind of the sports guy. I had thought about working for a team or working for an organization along those lines. But the more I kind of was exposed to different things, the more it's like, it just wasn't for me. So no, I didn't have this all figured out from the get-go, but the more I just was learning in all these other places, it's like no one's putting the pieces together the way that I think the pieces need to be put together. And I've worked at a bunch of different great facilities where the model really, like on paper, should have worked, but it didn't. And so that's kind of the long and short of it, if you will.
All right, so let's go into our last segment, and if you have any questions, please ask them now because we're getting, we're wrapping up. But Doc, let's go here. And I know this is one that's near and dear to you as we wrap up our third point. And that is true prevention is holistic, not generic. And here's your big slide on that. What are you talking about? True prevention is holistic.
Yeah, so I think whenever I originally was writing this slide, I was really coming at it specifically from like an exercise kind of approach.
Okay.
But if you think about it, again, the typical patient that comes to see a chiropractor, they have neck pain, they have back pain.
Correct.
And they want an adjustment. And so, okay, that's all good and well, but and there's a lot of chiropractors that have gone down the functional medicine route, which is kind of that nutritional piece. And everyone thinks they talk about lifestyle factors, but they really don't. And so I think that the way that I really wanted to kind of address this is, health is not one thing. So, if you've got a whole bunch of good things going, but you have this one segment of your life that isn't really under control, that can derail the whole thing. And so, there's so much to it. And I think whenever I was again kind of thinking of this from the exercise point of view, I've seen so many patients where they've gone to other providers and they've gone to good providers, but for whatever reason, they just didn't get the results that they were expecting or thinking that they were going to get. And whenever you ask them, so what did they do? And then it winds up being this relatively generic program. And it's like, well, you came in with this very specific knee issue. Doing 3 sets of 10 isn't going to cut it. We've got to really figure out the tissue that need, and it's like everyone is different, but I think that's like the biggest downfall in healthcare really is everyone's busy, everyone's trying to deal with too much, and they don't have time to really give the patient a specific plan. Because if you really look at the marketing, everyone says they do, individualized care plans. But if you actually went and asked them what's included in your individualized care plan, it's going to look like the guy down the street. They just call it something different. And so, that's the reason why I kind of take the approach that I do, is because every patient that I see, I want to be able to give them whatever it is that they need. And, if they come in for a particular pain, that's great. But we're asking about lifestyle factors. We're asking about sleep. And so, you might have back pain. You might move pretty good, but your sleep is the one thing that keeps throwing a wrench into the whole plan. So if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. And so you could be doing the best exercise in the world, but if you're still not sleeping, okay, we need to address that. And so, the sunlight piece is one of those things, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we would consider. So I think just letting the evidence kind of speak, and not, you came in with foot pain or ankle pain or hip pain. It's like,
correct.
I wasn't coming up with like this preconceived idea of this is the ankle protocol.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to see how you move and how it affects other movements.
Right.
And then with a blank slate, try to deliver the best. And it changes. It's not the same thing every single time. And I think that's the big thing. You see these people and they're like, well, I feel better, but you keep going back, getting the same thing. It's like, well, do you really think that you're going to, see change if you're consistently getting basically the same thing over and over?
So, Doc, you got a great question here. How much sleep do you recommend for optimal health? Great question.
So it changes with the seasons, and there's not a specific answer. I would say if you look at anthropological data and like historical, like the 8 hours that everyone like thinks of is not consistent with what we've seen from hunter-gatherer populations. Um, it can be as little as, you know, 6 to 7. Um,
Okay.
so the long story short is, in the wintertime, a little bit longer sleep is ideal. In the summertime, because our light cycles are a little bit longer and we
Right.
have less dark. So again, it goes back to the rhythm of the sun should dictate your sleeping patterns as well. So, in the wintertime, if you're getting closer to 9 to 10 hours, and in the summertime, you're getting closer to, 7.5, 8, you're fine. The one thing I will say, so at the equator, the light and dark cycles are basically 50-50, 12 hours of light, 12 hours of
Mhm.
dark. You up to Alaska, and there are times where basically it's dark all day long, and then there are times where it's light all day long. But if you look at the total amount of light at the equator and in Alaska, it's the exact same. So if you think of it that way, well, no one's going to stay up for 24 hours because it's light all day.
Right.
So in Alaska, you wind up getting less light because you're trying to fit your day into a normal work day.
Right.
So Alaska really isn't a great place for long-term living. You wonder why people are depressed, or you wonder why people have, certain mental health issues. There's a lot to be said about the mismatch with the light. So all I'm saying is that if you really wanted to pin me down to an answer, I would say if you're getting less than 6, it's a problem, and you really don't need more than 10. But if you happen to get a little bit more than 10 because of the dark cycle, it's not a big deal. But staying in bed all day is not good, no matter if you're sick or not. That's not necessarily that beneficial.
All right. Fine. I knew someone was going to ask this question. The bottom line is, Doc, okay, let's just go there. You're not a Hollywood star. Okay. Those could be perceived as, I don't know, racing glasses. You're not a race car driver. I guess maybe possibly welding glasses, or protective eye with machinery,
Yeah.
but they're not. So the question Abraham has for you, are
Mhm.
those sunglasses for minimizing light exposure after sunset?
Yes. So
Great
the
question, Abraham.
the unfortunate, so we had to do this at 7 o'clock. Well, I typically am in bed by 9:30. So as soon as the sun goes down, these come on. And so um, the interesting thing is, the eyes are super important, but your skin is just as important. So, you know, if I'm, inside after dark and we do have some lights on, I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt and I'm wearing pants, because the skin is basically
Interesting.
like it's a solar panel. So if
Who knew?
your eye, and so this is another problem with indoor lighting. So if your eye is getting one signal, this is the reason why sunglasses are terrible. So you go out in the sun and you're supposed to be getting UVB rays to make vitamin D, but you're blocking, the sun with sunglasses. So your eye is getting one signal, shade. Your skin is getting bright sun.
Right.
If you wear sunglasses, you're more likely to burn because of the mismatched signal. But anyway, these glasses, they're specific for after dark. And especially if I'm doing any computer work, which I try to minimize. I try to stay off my phone. I have a special program on my phone that turns the screen red as well, to basically eliminate all blue light after dark. Um,
Wow.
and so here's another thing that I didn't say that's also super important. So whenever you're getting your early morning sun exposure, no phone, no email, no AirPods, no tech devices whatsoever. You're basically ruining all the benefits by being in front of your phone. So you could have your phone playing a podcast or playing something, but just don't have it on you. It can
Okay.
be in your vicinity, but
Sure.
if it's
Yeah,
in your
that's what I
pocket
do.
or on
Yeah.
you, not
No,
ideal.
no, no, no. I put it on a table right next to me. That's what I do because you told me that.
But anyway, so these are
Yeah.
specifically designed to minimize so to make sure melatonin gets released at the proper, because if I had bright light shining on me, I'm suppressing melatonin, and so then my sleep is going to be disrupted. So I try to maximize everything that I can do to get the best sleep that I possibly can.
All right, gang, we are wrapping up here, come down the home stretch. And if you have any other questions, please ask them now because we're going to be wrapping up the broadcast. And Doc, I'm going to just bring up your summary. And if you want to kind of go through these kind of fast, that'd be kind of cool. But let's just bring it back home. Let's summarize today's podcast. And here you go. So there's your summary.
Yeah, so I think that the keys are making sure that the profession of chiropractic, we're really all encompassing. So just focusing on the adjustment isn't necessarily the best thing.
Right.
Doctors or teachers, we should be helping patients understand their health. And
Okay.
so I think that's a big thing. And from from really this light point of view, the light is actually the most important thing. Light controls all of our hormones, light controls all of our internal organs. So if you miss the light component, diet and exercise really don't even, like, they can't make up for the fact that you're. So if someone comes to me with pain, yeah, I want to help them get out of pain, and yeah, I want to help them move better. But if we're not addressing some of these other things, um,
Right.
they're really always going to be behind the eight ball. And so you can't out exercise a poor light environment, and you can't out eat a poor light environment. And then obviously specificity matters. So I think the big take home is, if you don't know what's going on, that's the role of the healthcare provider. Like, the first thing whenever you come to me, are you injured? Do we need to bump this up the triage ladder? Do we need an MRI? Do we need
Right.
x-rays? Do we need more more intervention, or is this something that we can kind of manage? And a lot of times it starts with the trial of care. So I don't know if we really need an intervention until we've at least tried something because I know the things that I do work. So if we try it and we kind of get stuck, then it's like, okay, now we need to be looking at some of these other things. But I think the specificity, and finding someone that really takes enough time to, I hate the word root cause because it doesn't mean what everyone thinks it, but it's like, we have to figure out the driver of why you're having the issues that
Right.
you're having. And so that could be a whole host of things. So, but if you don't explore, you're never going to figure it out. And if you assume, you're probably going to be wrong. So again, letting the evidence kind of just speak and
Yeah.
not make any assumptions. And I think that'll kind of go a long way.
Well, folks, if you have any last questions, ask them now because we're wrapping up right here. And Doc, if people want to get more information, certainly about you, your practice, I'm gonna pull up your website. You can speak to it. And what kind of information can they find there?
Yeah, so the website is very comprehensive. I tried to design it more of like an educational piece. There's a whole bunch of blogs. There's probably 30, 35 blogs
Okay.
that go into a lot of these topics, more in depth. But the layout of the website is pretty intuitive. There's a lot more information there, but yeah, you can find my email address, all the information that you need to book an appointment or anything along those lines, or just reach out if you have a question that we didn't really answer here.
All right. Well, Doc, I just want to say thank you for joining us here on the ZAGTalk podcast live. This was a lot of fun. And part of it, too, is because you've exposed me to so much. And I have known you for 18 years now. And to be really honest, it doesn't look like you've aged 18 years whatsoever. So I think your sun therapy thing's definitely working. But Doc, I know we're going to be coming out with, I know the goal is, every few weeks we want to be doing a podcast, and we'll
Sure.
certainly get more information out to people as what the next topic will be. But Doc, you got the final word. What do you want to say to wrap up tonight's podcast?
Yeah, so I think the question you need to ask yourself is, how many sunrises have you seen in your lifetime? If we look at the average lifespan of a person, you should see about 25,000. And if your answer is, I've only seen maybe a handful, 20, 25, make the goal to be where you're getting out and really trying to see the sunrise, because that's really where it all starts. It starts your day, but it also sets the stage for improved health over the long haul, if you will.
Absolutely. And I know that those are those keys to success. So with that, Doc, thanks again for being on. Certainly thanks to all of you, our live viewers, and certainly those that will be watching the replay as well. And we just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. And this, this very first kickoff of the ZAGTalk podcast live featuring Dr. Josh Wideman, as tonight he talked about cracking the chiropractic philosophy and certainly going well beyond the adjustment. I can just say this personally, Josh, this past summer has been one of the most educational, certainly therapeutic too, with all the work that you've done with me. On sometimes I'd come in and say I have an issue with something, and it just seemed like a lot of times you never addressed what I said I wanted, but somehow you had a back way of either upstreaming or downstreaming it, and you produced so many great results for me. I've never felt this way, and I can't believe it, being older in life at my age, that I'm seriously, I feel like I've hit the fountain of youth, and I'm moving so much better than I ever have. Certainly losing 91 pounds has had a lot to do with it,
Sure.
but also the sun therapy thing, it's been very game changing for me, which is why I really want to do this podcast. If nothing else, to let people know about the power of nature, and that's the sun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed our talk today.
All right. For Dr. Wideman, my name is Dr. Dan. I want to thank you for watching it all right here on the ZAGTalk podcast live. We'll see you next time.